Static posture is one of the most important tools that we as trainers can use to assess a new client or an existing client. And today I would like to go over some of the things that A, I look for when doing a static posture assessment, and B, what those things tell me or tell you about how we're gonna reach that client's goals, how we're gonna program for that client. And one of the most important things about the things that I'm gonna tell you today is just take note of these things. Even if you don't know what they mean right away, or you can't figure out how you're gonna approach them right away, when you're doing the assessment, just take note of it. If you notice that their foot is a little bit inverted, take note of that. If you notice that their hip is externally rotated, note that. You don't have to know what to do with it right away. The most important thing is that you have that information. You can figure it out later, but during the assessment, just get it down, just take note. So when I'm doing a static posture assessment, I always start from the ground up. So the very first thing I look at is their foot and their ankle complex. Here are the main things that I look for at the foot and ankle. First, I look for inversion, eversion. Is that foot rolling in? Is it rolling out? Rolling in could be a sign of weakness at the hip, could be a sign of weakness at the knee or the ankle. If it's rolling out, that could be some over tightness on the outside, the lateral aspect of the leg. But again, figure that out later, just look for it for now. The second thing I look for, are they coming up on their toes, or are they way back on their heels, or does their weight seem evenly distributed across their whole foot? Again, figure out what that means later through other assessments, separate video from this, but again, it's just important to note that for now. After the foot and ankle, I move up to the next joint. We look at the knee. Okay, here are the things I look for at the knee. Biggest one, probably most common one, is we look for valgus or varus. Are those knees caving in, or are they arching outwards? Again, caving in is often a sign of those weak glutes, right? Underactive glutes can't externally rotate at the hip. Varus, not as common going out, right? I almost never see this. I've barely ever seen it, I think, in my personal training experience. But that could be a sign, again, of some other tightness, just some weird postural things. Just take note. That's the first thing I look for. Second thing I look for, super common that I see, is people who have their knees locked out, right? Their static posture position has those joints stacked up like this, right? Their joints are stacked, their knees locked. I always try to make note of that. That's an easy fix right away, right? We just tell people to keep some slack in their joints, because that pressure on the joints is not good long term and doesn't let the muscles do what they're supposed to do. So that's the second thing I look for at the knee. Then moving up the chain further, I look at the hip. The hip is probably the most important one that I look at. There's tons and tons and tons of stuff happening at the hip. Things that are happening at the hip are often a cause of things that happen lower down the chain in the foot and the ankle and the knee, and often a cause of low back pain, which is a super common thing that people have, right? So here are some things I look for at the hip. Number one, I look for tilt. Are their hips tilted forward, anterior tilt, or backward, posterior tilt, right? Posterior tilt is not quite as common, you will see it, but that anterior tilt is gonna be really way more common with that arched lower back. That's the first thing. The second thing I look for is misalignment in the transverse plane, right? Are their hips rotated side to side this way? That could mess up a lot of things in the alignment of the spine and the alignment lower down the chain. Third thing, I look for internal external rotation at the hip of the femur. So if their legs are angled inward like this, that's internal rotation, or the opposite would be external rotation, right? So that's the third big one I look for at the hips. Those are the three major ones at the hips. Again, tons and tons of information on the hips. Super important that you do lots of research on this. The hip is one of the most important and undervalued joints in the whole body that trainers need to understand and know how to attack and fix. Then after the hips, I move up to the shoulders. Again, a couple different things that can be happening at the shoulders. Lots of people have shoulder issues. First thing I look for is elevation depression, right? Are their shoulders shrugged up here? Are they way down here, right? A lot of people get really tight up here. They get really tight in their traps and they kind of walk around like this, right? So that's the first thing I look for. How high are their shoulders? That could mean a lot of different things in terms of tightness and mobility. Second thing, maybe the biggest thing I look for, is the degree of internal rotation or external rotation at the shoulder. Most people you'll see will be super internally rotated at the shoulder, right? So if their palms are facing behind them in their static posture, it's a really good indication that their shoulders are internally rotating, that humerus is internally rotating at the shoulder joint. This can cause lots of problems. It's usually caused by lots of tightness through the pecs, right? And these muscles in the front of your body. A lot of people working at desk jobs all day will get a lot of tightness here. be internally rotated, cause some pain back here, causes shoulder pain, all sorts of stuff. So that's the other biggest thing I look for there. And then the third thing I look for at the shoulder in the static posture is the alignment again. So is one shoulder in front of the other? Is one shoulder behind the other? That can tell you some stuff about alignment of the spine, mobility issues, tightness issues. Figure it out later, take note of it now. And then sometimes can be grouped in with the shoulders, but the neck is kind of the last thing I look for. Some people will be standing this way or this way, so that's the first thing I look for at the neck. Is it tilted one side to the other? Some people I've also seen at that desk job, or sometimes just shy people, they get kind of this posture going on and they get their neck tucked down. All these muscles get tight, look for that. Or, it could happen, they get really hyperextended neck, could be way back here, could get tech neck here. So I just look at the alignment of the neck. Where is it sitting on their shoulders? What kind of angle does it have? What kind of tilt does it have? And that's what I look for at the neck. So again, when I'm doing this static posture assessment, I do it in every single assessment I ever do. It's super, super helpful in helping you develop a game plan later on of how you're gonna program for this client, what kind of mobility you're gonna need to do in order to get them into different positions. Of course, you are going to need other assessment tools to further your understanding of their limitations, right? But the static posture gives you a good idea of what you have to work with. And again, if you don't know what to do with the information you get during the assessment, that's totally fine. But the important thing is you know what limitations they have, what their body looks like, how it functions in its natural state. And you can look into it later. You can game plan later when you're doing your programming if you want to do any extra research on it, if you want to look up exercises for internally rotated hips or internally rotated shoulders, things like that. That's all great to do later. If you know it right off the bat, that's fine too. But the most important thing is to just get that information down, learn as much as you can from that, and then build on it with further assessments and programming.